You know how sometimes a news story comes along that just, well, makes you scratch your head?
Hmm.
That's kind of how a lot of us felt following the recent developments between the US and Greenland. This really intense controversy over something as fundamental as a nation's right to decide its own future. It's
Yeah,
quite something.
it really is.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today for you. This heated situation surrounding Donald Trump's Greenland proposal. We want to zero in on his specific actions and, importantly, the very strong reactions they triggered.
It is a fascinating case study, actually. Touches on history, long arcs of it, and some very current global strategies.
Huh.
For you, the listener, what probably jumped out immediately is just how this unfolded over time. The
Yeah,
way the language, the stakes seem to escalate pretty rapidly.
absolutely. We're talking about an initial suggestion, what was it, back in 2019, to purchase Greenland,
Right.
which was already, raising eyebrows,
Yeah.
challenging the whole idea of national sovereignty.
The big deal even then.
But then, fast forward to March 2025. During a congressional address, Trump says the U.S. would acquire Greenland one way or another.
One way or another, that's quite a phrase.
It is. And then, just a few weeks later, March 29th, an NBC interview, he's asked about using military force, and he doesn't rule it out, says, I never take military force off the table.
Wow.
That's a significant jump in intensity, right? It really makes you sit up and pay attention to what's happening here.
Yeah, it quickly became clear this wasn't just some, casual negotiation about real estate anymore.
Definitely not.
The sources we have, they really point to a considerable strain on diplomatic relations. I mean, that canceled trip back in 2019 to Denmark,
Oh, yeah.
after the Danish Prime Minister called the initial idea absurd, that was a very public sign of that strain, wasn't it?
Huge sign.
Yeah.
And then you had the tweets, the sort of aggressive tone in early 2025. That certainly didn't help smooth things over.
No, not at all.
Exactly. This isn't just about a piece of land. It really shines a light on, well, how nations interact, respect for national autonomy, all that. And right in the middle of this is a key figure, Greenland's new prime minister, Jens Frederik Nielsen. He just took office March 28th, 2025.
Right into the thick of it.
Exactly. And his response, unambiguous, he clearly stated, we do not belong to anyone else. We determine our own future.
Powerful words.
Very. So in this deep dive, we're going to really examine Trump's actions, explore the history here, because there's a lot of it,
Oh, that's a little...
understand the political tremors this caused, and of course, analyze Nielsen's really strong, resolute response. Think of it as your guide to understanding a truly, well, unique and consequential international moment.
Okay, so let's dig into those actions by Trump a bit more. That initial 2019 proposal to buy Greenland, as you said, it really set the stage, challenged the whole idea of Greenland sovereignty right off the bat. And Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen's reaction, calling it absurd, well, it was pretty blunt. A clear sign of Denmark's position.
Very clear. And following that, Trump canceling the state visit to Denmark was, like you said, a significant diplomatic snub.
Yeah.
Showed he was not pleased with their reaction.
Definitely sent a strong message.
It really did. And it's important to remember, even back then, Greenland's own voice was clear. The prime minister at the time, Mute Egade, he went on X, Twitter,
Right.
and stated unequivocally, Greenland is ours. We are not for sale and will never be for sale. That consistency, that firm rejection from Greenland itself, that's crucial here.
Absolutely. Now, jump to 2025, and the language, well, it takes a much more assertive turn, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Trump's statement in that March 5th congressional address, one way or another, I mean, that carries a lot of weight, suggests intentions maybe beyond just a simple transaction.
It implies something more forceful, definitely.
And then the March 29th NBC interview, saying with such certainty, we'll get Greenland. Yeah, 100%. And then, crucially, not ruling out military force. That's a major escalation in rhetoric.
It's a world away from standard diplomatic talk.
It really is.
And then you add in the tweets from early 2025, describing the Danish government as nasty and unfair.
Yeah, that kind of language, directed at a close ally. It's pretty unusual in diplomatic circles.
Extremely. As the Danish foreign minister, Lars Løkke Rasmussen, pointed out on March 30th, he said, we do not appreciate the tone. This is not how you speak to your close allies.
And that statement really highlights the diplomatic norms that, well, seem to be getting disregarded.
Yeah. What's particularly telling is how quickly the international reaction came.
Right. Our sources talk about protests in Nuuk, Greenland's capital, people holding signs, Yankees go home, planting Greenlandic flags.
That visual element, yeah, it really hammers home that strong sense of national identity, national ownership.
Exactly. And the criticism wasn't just local. You had major world leaders weighing in. Like French President Emmanuel Macron on March 28th, he publicly called Trump's rhetoric unjustified.
And it went beyond words, too, right? The visit by Vice President J.D. Vance on March 28th, the outgoing PM, Mute Ejed, described that as highly aggressive.
Yeah, apparently Vance accused Denmark of not investing enough in Greenland security during that visit.
Which Prime Minister Frederickson then quickly shot down, calling it not accurate.
Right. So you get this picture of, rapidly deteriorating trust, rising tensions.
It seems like it snowballed fast.
And looking at the broader picture, it's interesting. There was bipartisan criticism within the U.S., too.
That's important.
Yeah, Republican Congressman Don Bacon, March 28th, he said quite directly, "We are not Russia. I'm not a tyrant."
Coming from someone in his own party, that says a lot, doesn't it?
It really does, about the discomfort with the approach.
Yeah.
And remember that 2024 Pew Research survey. It showed 60% of Americans already disapproved of Trump's handling of international relations.
So these latest actions probably didn't help those numbers.
Likely not. There's this underlying concern, you see it in the sources, about whether U.S. foreign policy was being driven by national interests or, well, something more personal.
A personal agenda, yeah. And beyond the sort of high-level stuff, there were these other actions, too, perceived as pressure tactics.
Like what?
Well, Second Lady Usha Vance's visit for a dog sled race was apparently scaled back, and Donald Trump Jr. visited in January 2025, suggesting Greenland would benefit tremendously by becoming American.
Oh, okay.
Taken together, these things really contributed to this perception, for many observers, of a kind of coordinated annexation campaign.
Which brings us to a crucial point, right? What are the lasting effects of all this?
Exactly.
Our sources really emphasize the significant diplomatic fallout, the potential damage to decades, literally decades, of cooperation between the U.S. and Greenland.
It's not just about getting the territory, it's about the relationships being strained, maybe even broken.
And that could have much wider consequences.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Talk about the historical context here, because this idea, it isn't totally new, and Greenland's relationship with Denmark and the U.S., it's long and complex.
It absolutely is. So as we know, Greenland's been an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark since 1979.
Right.
They have significant control over their internal stuff. The 2009 self-governance agreement really solidified that, but Denmark still handles the big external things.
Yeah.
Foreign affairs, defense, monetary policy.
And Greenland gets the security benefit of Denmark being in NATO.
Exactly. That's part of the package.
So what makes Greenland so strategically vital, especially now?
Well, it's geography, mostly.
Okay.
Location, right? It's smack in the middle of the Arctic. It hosts the U.S. Pacific Space Base. Politico mentioned this March 28th. That base is vital for missile defense for North America, space surveillance, and keeping an eye on Russia and China in the Arctic.
Crucial piece of infrastructure.
Hugely. Plus, it sits on the shortest air route between North America and Europe. Big deal for security, for trade.
And climate change is factoring in now, too, isn't it? Opening up waterways.
Absolutely. That's a huge factor. The Atlantic highlighted this back in January. As the ice melts, you potentially get easier access to shipping routes and, maybe more importantly, significant natural resources. Oil, gas, rare earth minerals.
Things everyone wants.
Things everyone wants. So its strategic value is just climbing. For you, the listener, understanding this context helps explain, why there's so much focus on this territory.
Makes sense. And the U.S. and Greenland, they have worked together for a long time.
Oh, a very long time. Think back to World War II. The U.S. set up military bases there.
Right.
That relationship was formalized later, 1951 Defense Agreement. During the Cold War, the U.S. had like 17 installations there at one point.
No, 17.
Yeah, now it's just perfect. But beyond military stuff, there's been huge collaboration on science, especially climate change research, ice core drilling, funded by the National Science Foundation.
Very important work.
And conservation, too, working together on protecting polar bears, Arctic foxes, that sort of thing.
So connecting that history to now, the U.S. has actually thought about buying Greenland before, hasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. This isn't the first time the idea has surfaced. The New York Times ran a piece March 24th detailing this. Secretary of State William Seward looked into it back in the 1860s.
Seward, of the Alaska Purchase fame.
The very same. And the idea popped up again around World War I and World War II.
Interesting. But what's different this time?
Well, according to our sources, it's the approach. Those past interests were explored, maybe quietly, diplomatically. Trump's approach is consistently described as using aggressive rhetoric and threats of force.
So it's the how, not just the what.
Exactly. The manner is starkly different. That's the key distinction.
And adding another layer here is Greenland's own push for independence, right?
Yes, that's a really critical element. Prime Minister Nielsen campaigned on gradual independence, aiming for economic self-reliance.
Getting away from depending on Denmark.
Essentially, yeah. Reducing reliance on that big block grant from Copenhagen. And this desire for more autonomy, it's shared by many Greenlanders. Euronews mentioned on March 30th how some view Denmark's long control as, well, basically colonial.
Okay. So how have Trump's recent actions played into that delicate dynamic?
Well, the sources suggest it's risky. It could destabilize things, fuel anti-American feelings.
That poll you mentioned.
Right, that January 2025 poll. 85% of Greenlanders oppose annexation. Nearly half see Trump's interest as a direct threat. That's huge.
Yeah.
There's a real danger this undermines U.S. credibility in the Arctic, just when competition with Russia and China is heating up. It could, ironically, push Greenland closer to other partners who show more respect for their autonomy.
Turning now to the broader political fallout, the implications. It sounds like the potential to destabilize the Arctic and really damage U.S. global standing are the big concerns coming through.
Absolutely. That really emerges strongly from the analysis. And this apparent pattern of Trump maybe conflating U.S. national interests with his own personal agenda, that's a recurring theme.
Like that NBC interview comment.
Exactly. I don't care about the message this sends to Putin.
Yeah.
That's pretty telling, isn't it? Especially given Russia's history. It raises serious questions about the bigger strategic picture.
And Danish PM Fredriksen's call for unity among allies after that.
Yeah, reported by ABC News on March 30th. That underscores the level of worry among partners.
And this is all happening at such a sensitive time for the Arctic anyway.
Precisely. Russia, China, they're more active there. Greenland has that mineral wealth we talked about. The Atlantic piece from January really stressed this growing global interest.
And that comment from the outgoing PM.
Right. Reuters reported March 10th, saying Trump's disrespect makes Greenlanders less keen on deeper U.S. ties. That's a tangible potential consequence. Could really weaken the U.S. strategic position right there.
What about the impact on U.S. credibility worldwide?
Significant, according to the sources. Euronews noted back in January the shock among European leaders. The U.S. is, the leader of NATO. Actions like these make allies question things. Danish Foreign Minister Rasmussen's criticism of the tone, reported by The Guardian March 30th, illustrates that erosion of trust.
And the Putin angle.
Yeah, Politico reported March 28th that Putin apparently endorsed Trump's designs on Greenland. That's deeply concerning. It could embolden Russia in the Arctic, couldn't it?
Yeah, potentially. Domestically, has this exposed divisions or challenges?
It seems so. That 2024 Gallup poll, 65% of Americans thinking Trump's foreign policy harms the U.S. standing. That's a big number.
Shows public concern.
Definitely. And the bipartisan criticism is notable, too. Democrats calling for a rethink, Republicans like Don Bacon urging respect for allies. It shows a broad unease about the direction and the need for maybe a more nuanced, collaborative approach.
So this whole episode, it really puts diplomatic skill, or maybe the lack of it, under the microscope.
Yeah, it served as a real test. And based on the widespread criticism, our sources suggest the outcome wasn't seen as very successful. Raises serious worries about long-term damage to the U.S.-Greenland relationship and America's reputation globally.
Okay, let's focus now on the response from Greenland itself, specifically from the new Prime Minister, Jens Fredrik Nielsen. Took office March 28th, 2025. Youngest ever PM, right? Only 33.
That's right, 33. And our sources consistently paint him as this voice of reason and resilience amidst all the friction.
And his first move was pretty clear, wasn't it?
Very clear and very quick. March 30th, just 2 days in office, that Facebook post. The message was direct. The United States won't get that. We do not belong to anyone else. We determine our own future.
And that resonated.
Hugely, both in Greenland and internationally,
Yeah.
according to the report.
It was described widely as a masterclass in diplomacy. How so?
Well, he managed this balance, right? Firm rejection of the U.S. idea, totally unequivocal, but delivered with a measured, dignified tone. No escalation from his side.
Calm under pressure.
Exactly. His call for Greenlanders to react with calm, dignity, and unity, reported by Sky News March 30th. That was really significant. Remember, his government was brand new, formed after elections where anti-American sentiment was apparently a factor.
So keeping things steady was important.
Crucial. And Euronews noted the same day, his whole political platform is about gradual independence through economic self-reliance. So his stance on sovereignty, it's deeply rooted in his political vision.
How did his response actually help de-escalate things?
Well, simply put, his calm, decisive words were such a contrast to the more confrontational stuff coming from the U.S. side.
Mm-hmm.
It created space for dialogue, not just more conflict. And it won him a lot of praise internationally.
Like the Danish PM's visit.
Exactly. Mette Frederiksen visited in early April. ABC News reported she publicly praised Nielsen's handling, expressed her deepest respect. That's a strong endorsement.
And NATO chimed in too.
Yeah, CNN reported March 13th that NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte signaled support for Greenland's right to self-determination. So Nielsen's approach seemed to shore up support.
It really highlights that idea of soft power, doesn't it? Influencing through persuasion, not force.
Absolutely. Nielsen's focus on respectful and constructive dialogue seems to have been incredibly effective here. And remember that poll, 85% opposition to annexation.
Right.
His measured response likely prevented that strong public feeling from boiling over into something worse, averting a bigger crisis, perhaps.
What about the broader picture for Nielsen? Is he seen as a bigger figure now?
Our sources suggest he's definitely emerged as a notable figure on the global stage, someone who can act as a stabilizing force against external pressures, not just the U.S., but potentially Russia and China too, with their Arctic interests.
And his focus on economic independence.
It ties right in. Reducing reliance on that Danish block grant, it's part of the same strategy as asserting autonomy diplomatically. He's being pragmatic, rejecting Trump's overtures firmly, but still saying Greenland is open to cooperation on neutral interests. It suggests a very strategic path forward.
So as we wrap this deep dive up, what are the main things for you, our listener, to take away from all this?
Okay, I think three key things. First, the assertive U.S. actions and rhetoric really sparked a major diplomatic incident with a close ally, and it challenged basic ideas about national sovereignty.
Right.
Second, Prime Minister Nielsen's response, calm, firm, was crucial in cooling things down and clearly stating Greenland's position on its own future. And finally, this whole thing just underscores how vital diplomacy, mutual respect, and understanding history are in international relations, especially in really sensitive places like the Arctic.
Absolutely. And we can't forget just how important Greenland is strategically. Military, science, potential resources. This controversy really shows the high stakes when diplomacy goes wrong in a region like that.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Does this kind of foreign policy approach unilateral, assertive, carry long-term risks? Could it actually damage U.S. interests and relationships, especially with allies in critical areas like the Arctic?
That's a big question.
And maybe consider the flip side. Does Prime Minister Nielsen's leadership offer a compelling model for smaller nations trying to navigate self-determination and cooperation when facing big external pressures?
Definitely some important points to think about there. We really encourage you to consider these issues and maybe dig deeper into the fascinating, complex world of Arctic geopolitics and the subtle but powerful art of diplomatic strategy.